3, 2, 1.
Westworld was a place in the computers. It was sort of a idea of a cyberspace. It's what a full cyberspace world would look like. There was sort of a place of the mind they could go to work out problems.
It was sort of like when we play a video game. We imagine ourselves in the virtual world of the video game. It's, and we're in control. And that's really what, I guess, Quest World was for Jonny Quest. It was not just being inside the video game, being inside this computer world, but it was reality. You could actually defeat real villains while being in this universe.
Jonny and Haji created this virtual reality world in their own computer that they would enter, and everything within that world would be created in CGI. And there would be a clear delineation of where the 2D ends and the 3D begins and vice versa.
Can you believe this?
It was initially created for themselves as games that they could play and challenge each other.
We call it Quest World. This is the gateway to a whole new reality.
But fairly soon, one of the arch-villains, Surd, would infiltrate it, and it became contaminated, and there would be a lot of struggle and challenges within that Quest world. So it was a whole new separate world to explore.
All right, let's hit it.
Their world was not unlike a James Bond world where they rode on motorcycles and there's fast cars and yeah, there's some jetpacks, but they're in Quest world. They could create stuff that's beyond that. That is, where the limitation is really just their own imagination.
You could be one day in Quest World and you'd be Mr. Buff. Can you imagine that? You've all the parts of your personality, your weakest parts, your strongest parts, your bits you don't like. If any one moment you were in Quest World or in virtual reality, and at that particular moment, one of those parts of your personality came through, that's what would project.
It was sort of what they would create for themselves. So they thought themselves as superheroes, as bigger, stronger, faster, whatever, they can.
It was going to be a combination of CG and some 2D animation. How those two were going to mix was a question we didn't really know at that point, because there's still a lot of 2D animation in Quest World in that show. We weren't quite sure how that was all going to go together.
Toy Story had just come out, and it really blew a lot of people away that you could even make a feature with the computer. And so we were pretty computer crazy at that point. We wanted to see more computer-generated animation, and it would be a few years before the next one would come out from Pixar or from anybody. So seeing computer animation regularly on Jonny Quest was quite a thrill.
Everyone wanted some full CG animation, but I think a lot of the companies hadn't really quite gotten used to what it would take to produce.
Once the head is constructed by the Quest World computer, it'll be a snap to put the real head together.
Yes, but let us keep in mind that this process will take a long time, Jonny. Not to mention use up a good deal of the system's memory.
Not only did it need to be designed, but the technology for producing that stuff on a weekly basis wasn't exactly worked out yet.
It's one thing to control a drawn series where you have schedules which have been figured out for decades now, but the CG stuff was so new and so different.
Even in the best scenario, it takes 2 or 3 shows just to kind of get in the rhythm and find the style, right? Here we are, we were, thrown into it, and you got to find it right away. And so it was a little bit nerve-wracking, especially for the executives, because we haven't seen the pipeline if it works.
By the time that Quest World was developed and embraced by the studio. You know, CGI techniques had moved on a little bit. They were a little bit more accessible, a little bit more economical.
It's a lot of hours because you're under tremendous pressure, but it's not work that you can spread out to a lot of different people because you're all working on the same thing. It'd be sort of like 5 different chefs are using the same chopping board.
You know, it was still so new that the executives and people in charge didn't really know what they were going to get, if they were going to get it in time, whether it was going to make the air dates. You know, so there's a lot of risk involved in trying these CG sections.
They had worked up sheets and sheets of design samples, not just of the characters, but also of their toys and the guns and all the kind of things that would majorly figure into the show. When you draw characters in normal 2D animation, you really don't draw any volume to faces. They're essentially just outline. They have no volume. So when you're building a CG model, it's all about defining volume. The drawing just tells you what volume you need to imagine. It takes a long time to get to that point where you actually have a character that can work coherently. But when you do, it's actually fairly easy to animate it. The motorcycle sequence was, I think, the first big one that we did. It was picked out because it was fairly easy to do, because someone on a motorcycle, there's a little bit of motion, but you don't really see a lot. You don't want to start off with the hardest thing you can do, obviously. Putting together a CG animated character is really complex. That first show that we put together, we didn't have the CGI Jonny ready to go at that point. So we had to go with the 2D animation in Quest World in that show. The reason that his face is cell animated is very simple. It wasn't ready at the time. But it seemed to work out pretty well. Everyone really liked that first show that we put together. The funny thing about CG animation is that old CG animation really looks old.
Now, between you and me, they look pretty funky, but I think it's a real time capsule of where CG was at the time. It gave it an extra visual edge, and particularly in its day, it was definitely something different, something that no other show had.
It wasn't as easy to do as it would have been now. Nowadays, we can just do a lot more quicker. We have much faster computers. The software is, generally speaking, more sophisticated and efficient. We spend a lot of time and money doing things that nowadays only take a quarter of that amount of time.
If we were to update Jonny Quest again, Quest World would be kind of an open forum for everyone to contribute, and be kind of like this afterlife situation where everyone from all over the world can contribute, create their own characters and own situation, and that they would be part of it.
I mean, obviously it would be much more sophisticated now because, you know, you can achieve much more with a lot more CGI, a lot more 3D. But I think what we would have done is to have used those techniques to explore a lot more kind of psychological drama.
I can imagine someday some future Jonny Quest where the whole show is in motion capture CG, and then they go into Quest World and that part is done in Alex Toth artwork. You know, that would be really cool.
I think for the most part it worked quite well. It was really Hanna-Barbera and Time Warner's really first try at doing a lot of CGI on a TV schedule. There's things that could have been better, and there's things that probably could have been worse. It came out nice. It was a good effort, and I think it was pretty well received at the time. Considering what we had available to do it, I think we did pretty good.